Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, colorful corals, underwater worlds in need of protection. Presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Eric Ramirez. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Take it away, Eric.
Thank you so much for that incredible presentation. Again, my name is Eric Ramirez, and today's topic is colorful corals, underwater worlds in need of protection. So before we continue, I would like to play to you an audio of how a healthy coral reef is supposed to sound like. So this incredible cacophony full of different sounds, cracking, tapping, striking, and snapping. This is just like a huge orchestra. And this is telling us that a coral reef is alive. For me, it reminds me a lot of a big city like Mexico City or New York City. When you're on the street, and you hear all these different sounds, you understand that that city is alive. Okay, so a little bit, I want to talk about a little bit about myself. I'm a marine biologist. I got expert or just I study more about sharks, ecology and genetics too. But I just need to tell you something really quickly. I'm not a coral expert. The reason why I'm doing this webinar is because 2 years ago I was diving. One of my favorite activity in the world is diving, and I was diving with my wife in Indonesia, a beautiful place called Raja Ampat. And when we were diving, I realized that, oh my God, this place is so colorful. There were so many corals with different shapes. I was in a fairy tale. I couldn't imagine that a place like that's supposed to look like this. So after watching this documentary, Chasing Coral, I realized that I really wanted to know more about corals. That's why I'm presenting this to you. So Rob, if you can help me out with the audience, I want to ask all of you, what is for you a coral? So is that a plant, is that a rock, or an animal? If you want to answer that question, you can type down your answer, and Rob, if you can tell me the answers, I guess that'll be great.
Absolutely. So if you have a thought, go ahead to the upper right hand corner and click on, looks like you got a couple in the question field. So go to the question field and put your answer in. All right. So we've got someone saying plant, we've got animal. Now we have all three.
All three?
Animal, uh, animal. Lots of people say animal, plant, and
Animal.
animal. I think
Okay.
it looks
Okay.
like we're mostly animal and then
Animal.
there's plant, but there is a
Okay.
few that say all three.
Okay, perfect. So thank you so much for that. Actually, coral is an animal, but why it looks like a rock? We have three here different images. This is the coral. This is actually a mineral, and this is calcareous algae. That means that it's an algae that creates calcium carbonate. So yes, corals are animals because they cannot produce their own food, but they are collectively a coral, but they are made out of very small organisms called polyps. But we're going to talk about this in the next slide. So first of all, corals, they belong to this huge group of marine animals called Cnidaria. Cnidaria, they encompasses different organisms like hard corals, jellyfish, sea anemones, and soft corals too. So in this group of cnidarians, we have a class called Anthozoa. So all the anthozoans, they have polyps. Okay, Eric, slow down. What is a polyp? So polyps are solitary or colonial sedentary organisms who have a columnar shape, let's say. They have a mouth on the uppermost part of the body, and around the mouth, they have different tentacles. These tentacles are covered with nematocysts, which are stinging cells. I'm going to describe this later, no worries. So these organisms are they're secreting something, a compound called calcium carbonate. So I'm gonna call my friend Jeff. This is my friend Jeff, the plant, because this is going to make us our life way more easier. So imagine that this polyp is this flower, this plant, sorry, and this organism is going to secrete a type of cup-like skeleton, which is going to be underneath the polyp. So this is going to help out to protect the organism against predators, but when during certain times of day or night, the, the tentacles are going to project outside in order to feed upon different organisms. Okay, so this is the cup-like or calyx. We have here the polyp, and the polyp goes here. Okay, so in this huge group, Anthozoan, we have two not exclusive groups called hexacorals or hard corals, and then we have the octocorals or soft corals. So hexacorals looks like this, like a rock. Okay, all this coral is made out of calcium carbonate. And then we have another type of corals, soft corals. Although not all the skin is made out of calcium carbonate, they have some pieces of this coral which are made of calcium carbonate. Okay, so again, hexacorals, they make their cups with calcium carbonate, and they are normally one next to each other. So when we have multiple polyps in the same place, these polyps together are going to create a coral. Okay. In the other side, we have the subcorals. We also have polyps, but in this case, all the structure, the skeleton, like let's just call it like this, it's not made out of calcium carbonate. It's made of orgonin, which is a protein that the polyp secretes. And inside they have a type of structures that we call sclerates. These sclerates are kind of like the bones inside, and they have different shapes like this. And depending on the shapes, um, scientists have discovered that some of them are gonna tell us what kind of species are. So, so Eric, slow down. What do you mean by polyps and forming colonies? So let's keep it super simple. So this is a polyp again. So we have the cylindric shape, and then we have the tentacles on the top. The mouth supposed to be here. So if we decided to build a house, let's say that the polyps are kind of the bricks. Okay, so one brick is next to the other. So when we arrange different bricks in a certain specific arrangement, what we have is a house, in this case, a coral. So all these little things are representing a polyp, all together forming a coral shape. But what happens, for example, if we have multiple houses, if we have a lot of different colors of different types of species, as a result, we will have a coral reef, something I call a neighborhood made out of different type of houses. Okay, so these corals, these individuals, okay, they have uh, two different types of reproduction strategies. First, we have the sexual, and the second, we have the asexual. Sexual involves um, fertilization of eggs. So once or twice, 2 times per year, something really incredible happens in the water, especially very close to the shallow waters. So all the corals will spawn. That means that they will release the eggs and the sperma. Once they're in the water, the sperm will fertilize the eggs, and as a result, they will have a planula or a type of larvae. The larvae is going to remain suspended in the water around 2 or 3 weeks, depending on the species, until it finds a very suitable spot to settle. Could be on top of a colony already formed, could be in another place. So once it's attached to this place, it will start to produce a polyp. Okay, and so this is the way how they reproduce sexually. But the asexual reproduction doesn't involve sex. So in this case, for example, something that happens is the polyps inside of the coral, they are cloning themselves. And to this process, we call it budding. So from one polyp, then after the division, we have two. That's one way. And the second way how we get another coral is by fragmentation, due to, for example, I don't know, an anchor of a boat was very close and it broke accidentally a piece of coral, or by a natural disaster like a hurricane just broke apart different parts of in different fragments the coral, so that new piece of coral is going to attach to the surface and is going to create a new organism. Okay, so just in a very like easy terms, sexual reproduction is more for dispersion of the organism, and asexual reproduction is more like to produce more organisms in the same coral or in the same colony. Okay, so well, Eric, if they're animals, what do they eat? Good question, right? So remember our flower, Jeff? So during the day, some species of coral they remain inside of their cups, inside of the um, calcium carbonate houses. So during the night, what they do is they get out of their a little bit of their cups, and using their tentacles, they capture all the organic matter which is suspended in the water, but also they catch different organisms like zooplankton or phytoplankton. Okay, so uh, in order to catch these organisms, they have to have a very good strategy to catch them and also to kill them, right? So I have a question for you. Have you ever been stung by a coral, sea anemone, or a jellyfish? If the answer is yes, I'm sure that you know that it hurts a lot, especially by a jellyfish, right? And the reason why it hurts so much is because, as I said before, these organisms they have on top of the tentacles some specialized cells called nematocysts. These nematocysts they're stinging cells on coral tentacles, and this is the structure of a nematocyst. It's like a capsule, and inside they have a harpoon-like structure, which once it touches a different tissue, is going to be launched and it's going to hit the organism, and normally it's going to pass a different type of toxins. Okay, so I bring you a very interesting video. How does it look like? So this is happen. This happens when you touch a sea anemone or a coral or a jellyfish. Ouch! Right? So this is how they catch their food. Like the majority of the corals, but also we have other different type of organisms, other different type of corals, especially this is exclusively from the stony or the hard corals. And the hard corals, they have a very specific symbiotic relationship with a microalgae called zooxanthellae. So in this case, this symbiotic relationship is a mutualistic or mutualism relationship because it means that the coral is taking something from the microalgae and the microalgae is taking something from the coral. In this case, the zooxanthellae is actually living inside of the polyp, and it's interesting because the green color of this coral is given by the zooxanthellae. Several types of coral reef formers corals, like in this case the hard corals, they have different colors, and everything is given by different types of different species of zooxanthellae. So this is interesting because the zooxanthellae, as being a macroalgae, needs light to perform its photosynthesis activities. Um, the polyp is giving shelter to the zooxanthellae and also CO2, carbon dioxide, and other type of compounds like nitrogen and phosphorus. In exchange, the zooxanthellae is given the color, but also is producing a lot of different sugars. And in some type of species, the polyps depend on up 90% on the chemical compounds that zooxanthellae produces to them. So have you ever heard the term coral bleaching? Okay, coral bleaching, polyps, zooxanthellae. I won't tell more. I will tell you this later, but there's a very specific relationship between the zooxanthellae and the polyps. So these are most likely the most common type of coral reefs. We have fringing reef, barrier reef, and atoll. So fringing reef are the most common reef, and normally the corals are surrounding, in this case, an island or a piece of land. Barrier reef are the second most common, and as you can see in this picture, half of the island is middle sunk, uh, and creating like a type of space between the reef and also and creating like a type of lagoon. So this is very common, for example, in Australia, in Mexico, in the south, we have this type of barrier reefs. And obviously, due to the amount of coral reef, we have different depositations of sand around the island or the volcano in this case. So atoll, they are not very close to the continents. As a matter of fact, they're in the middle of the ocean, and these are large depositations of sand, and underneath we have the coral, and normally inside we have lagoon, and around this lagoon we have some sand, and we have also sometimes mangrove and other type of organisms, but underneath we have the corals. So this is another picture of how these three coral reef looks like. Okay, atoll, this is the last common, and then we have fringing reef and barrier reef too. So Eric, what about coral diversity? Well, according to the scientists, there are around 7,000 different of described species in the Anthozoan group. That includes the hard corals, the soft corals, sea anemones, sea wipes, sea pans, sea fans, black coral too. But in this case, I tried to picture one of the most astonishing coral species that I found for you. So first of all, we have the mushroom. Here on the right part, we have mushroom coral. So remember that I told you that these polyps, they could be solitary or they could like create large colonies. So in this case, this coral is only one polyp, no more. And this could be like the size, this could size around uh, 5, 6, 10 inches in diameter. So yes, we have only one organism living and creating this fantastic coral. So then we have one of the most common and the most highly distributed coral in the ocean. This is the staghorn coral. This one with the elkhorn, they're the most common, especially in the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, and and of course that these ones are in critical danger as well. So then we have a very funny coral. This is the bubble coral. Bubble corals, they have different symbiosis with other organisms, with some crabs, and then with some other type of crustaceans too. And these bubble-like forms are actually the polyps. And during the night, the polyps, which look like bubble or like grapes, they release the gas which is inside, letting the tentacles open to catch the food. And then we have the carnation coral. I love this coral because remember about the protein that they have and the sclerites, which are kind of the skeleton. So all these yellow structures are the sclerites. And the most interesting thing about this coral is that this inhabits in the Red Sea, and it attracts a lot of divers because of the colors, because of the shapes and everything. And the last one, this is my favorite. This is a coral which belongs to the genus Murillacea and Muricella. And this is very interesting because there are two organisms here. So here we have the coral and all the polyps here. And here, this is not a polyp. This is actually a pygmy seahorse. I was able to dive in Raja Ampat in Indonesia. And my dive master was pointing me out pygmy seahorse. They're so little, so small. And even with a pointer, it was for me impossible to see the pygmy seahorse. So this is only tells how some species are so specialized to live very close to the corals, in this case, a soft coral like this. So what about the distribution? So corals are found in all the oceans and at different depths, from shallow waters to very deep areas below 6,000 meters. But coral reef formers are situated between tropics and shallow waters in all this area. That's why we have here the largest concentration of corals. And these coral reef formers are most likely the hard corals. The hard corals which have this symbiotic relationship with the microalgae. Okay? We have other types of corals in other places, of course, but in this area is where we have the largest abundance of corals in the world. Okay? Just to give you more clues about the coral distribution, corals they tend to live in a threshold between 18 Celsius degrees and 30, 31, 29, depending on the place. So although they can tolerate different temperatures, if we raise the temperature of the water, sorry, the coral will get under a lot of stress, but I will tell you this about this later. Okay, so this is how a shallow water coral reef looks like. We have hard or stony corals everywhere, displaying different colors due to the relationship with the microalgae, the zooxanthellae. But then we have this. So very recently, scientists have discovered that in a very places where the light cannot penetrate, we have a lot of different types of corals. This is amazing because in the past they thought, due to this relationship between the corals and the microalgae, that they must have been distributed only on shallow waters because they need sunlight. But with new technology, they have discovered that probably we have the same amount of coral species that we have on the surface on the bottom. So this is interesting because these coral display very different type of colors. So you might ask, Eric, why do they have this coloration if they don't have the zooxanthellae or the macroalgae to give them the coloration? Okay, some corals, like the soft corals and other stone corals, they don't need the relationship with the zooxanthellae or with the microalgae. They can produce their own pigments, most likely carotenoids, in order to produce color. But it's interesting because colors are just a perception of our eyes. As a matter of fact, color doesn't exist in nature. Okay, maybe people are gonna be like, "What, Eric?" But I'm looking at this is orange and this is purple, lila, pink, whatever you want to call it. Well, the thing is that all the objects, once are hidden by the light, which is white, they are absorbing different wavelengths and they're reflecting others. So that light which is not absorbed is and the one is reflected, we take it and we perceive this as a different colors. Okay, this is a topic for another webinar, not today, but I'm just going to clarify that. So we have different type of we have very important coral reefs in the world, and of course the most important definitely is the Great Barrier Reef in Australia, and this measures 1,600 miles in the east coast of Australia, and this is the home of different type of fish. As a matter of fact, it has one of the largest collection of corals, of fish, of sharks in the world. Then we have the Mesoamerican Reef, which touches the coast of Mexico, Belize, Guatemala, Honduras. And this measures 700 miles, and is also the home of different species of fish, sharks, sea turtles. And personally, I was there 3 years ago, and I used to live in Baja. And in Baja, we have some patches of coral, but nothing to do with this. Like, this is just great. The water is so clear, crystal clear, and there are so many different shapes and forms. And then we have the Red Sea Coral Reef, which is not a barrier. This is a fringed type of reef. And as a matter of fact, in this place we can see different types of corals as well. And sorry, and this is considered a young coral reef. It's all about, it has been here since 5,000 years ago. And in this place, this place have attracted the attention of different scientists because many of the species which inhabit in this area are high temperature high temperature tolerant. And this is great because scientists have been studying how it's possible that these organisms can tolerate high levels of temperature. I mean, we want to know because maybe there's a way how we can use biotechnology in order to create corals more high temperature resistant. So this is also impressive. Although this is not a single coral reef, this is a compound of different coral reefs. This is something that scientists have described as a coral triangle. This is the world center of marine diversity. In this place, we can see 76% of all the coral species. This is so incredible because this place is so diverse that you cannot compare this place with others. And this is between Philippines, Malaysia, Indonesia, Timor Leste, Papua New Guinea, and Solomon Island. Okay, so after all this information, what are the benefits of keeping our coral reefs healthy, Eric? Mm, And first, ecological benefits, climate change resilience, economic, social, and cultural, of course. So ecological benefits, coral reefs, they tend to protect the coastline. They tend to protect all the different beaches as well. How and why? Well, from waves and from natural disasters like hurricanes. So it has been proved that corals absorb 97% of the waves which are hitting the coastline. So this is really important, especially for human settlements. Nurseries for marine life, of course, many different species of invertebrates or fish, especially the early stages of the life, they're very small, and coral reefs they offer a great protection, a great shelter for them, so they could be protected by the coral against different predators. This is just great because they are increasing they're reducing the mortality at early stages due to the presence of different corals as well. Remember that these organisms are getting different type of minerals from the water in order to produce calcium carbonate, and the carbon and the nitrogen passes from one system to the other. Maybe it's not fixed by other organisms, by the corals themselves, but maybe it's fixed by other organisms. So yes, corals are really, really important to remain the carbon and nitrogen cycle intact. Diversity hotspots. Diversity hotspots. I mean, this image is just everything. There are so many organisms coexisting in this incredible ecosystem. We have fish, we have sea cucumbers, sea urchins, sea stars, we have other type of corals. So yes, they are enhancing, they're boosting all the marine life with their presence. Climate change resilience. So as we said before, these places are hotspots, but also these places they tend to have key species who are playing an important role in the ecosystem. For example, the parrotfish. The parrotfish are herbivorous organisms, and they're really good controlling, keeping away the algae populations which might compete with the coral. Okay, so what happened, for example, if we decided to remove the parrotfish, the algae will take over, and they basically block all the sunlight, and the coral eventually will die. Okay, so although they're not fixing a lot of CO2, carbon dioxide, they are helping other ecosystems indirectly to fix the CO2. like sea lands or like mangroves. Mangroves, they are well known to fix a lot of like super like large amounts of CO2 underneath the sand. And then of course these coral reefs, they are very close to the shore. Most of them, they prevent floods and they reduce the wave action. This is really good and really important for um, economic activities, and also really good for human settlements as well. So about economic benefits, fisheries. Most of the fish which are important for fisheries, they spend the early stages, as I said before, in coral reefs because the coral reefs offer protection. So once they're ready, in fisheries, they say that they are recruited to the fish stock, which is gonna be the populations which gonna be fished by the ships. So without corals, we won't have enough fish to supply the economic demands that the population needs. As medicine, directly or indirectly, the corals, but also many type of organisms, many type of invertebrates like snails, like sea cucumbers, like sea stars, are producing natural marine products. This have been studied by the scientists, and as a result, they have developed different type of drugs or different type of medicines for our uh, attempting to cure different diseases like genetic diseases or also certain type of cancers too. Tourism, I think this is one of the most important because it touristic activities like diving, snorkeling, and sport fishing as well are producing around the globe $36 billion in a year. So this represents 30% of the total economic value of the coral reef. This is a lot of money that goes, and something that I like the most, to the local communities. So, for example, some local communities who were before fishing, now they're not fishing because they understand that if they fish a lot in these places, they might finish all the natural resources who are part of the coral system. And eventually, we won't have anything. And with tourism, you're bringing a lot of people to see these incredible places while you are keeping care of them. So that's win-win for all of us. Social and cultural, the livelihood of several places. Um, a lot of people since a long time ago are taking advantage of these places, either fishing now in tourism or just for recreation as well. Research and education. I love that when we are guiding either snorkel or diving trips, it's so fascinating how we can tell these sort of bits before we dive, and after that, our divers they feel more. Oh my God, I was diving in a place like this, full of polyps, and these polyps they have a symbiotic relationship with the microalgae too. So I think this adds a lot of value to these places, and also many scientists are performing different studies because corals they tend to be bioindicators. Okay, wait a minute, don't get scared. Bioindicators are organisms who are telling us that something is not going well in the ecosystem if they're presenting certain symptoms. It's like us, for example. How do I know if I have a bacteria in my system or a virus? If I'm presenting certain symptoms like flu, like if I'm coughing or if I have chills, I'll go to the doctor and the doctor will tell me what exactly I have. So what happened for so uh, these symptoms are indicating that something is going wrong in my system. So like in the coral reefs. So if the coral reefs are bleach, or they have diseases, or we have less, that means that the environment is changing. So local communities and traditions, of course, many indigenous tribes have been taking advantage of these places, and they perform different rituals, and they have a very spiritual connection with the coral reefs. And this is so unique and fascinating. So, okay, Eric, we get it. Corals are important, but it's something affecting them. The answer is yes, many things. global warming. This is the main factor. So remember that I told you that this the hard corals, which are forming these big reefs, they can tolerate certain levels of certain temperatures. Once we rise a little bit, 1 or 2 Celsius degrees of temperature, the microalgae will get super stressed, and the coral is going to expel it, and it's going to get bleached. No worries, I'll explain you this later. But yeah, this is just adding a lot of stress to incredible and pristine place like this. So global warming, number one. Second, overfishing. If we remove all the organisms who are part of the reef ecosystem, like we shouldn't see organisms like different unities. We need to see them as a collective group, which is playing an important role in order um, to boost or to enhance life in these places. So if we remove, for example, the fish in this ecosystem, someone is not going to eat what it was eaten before. Um, Corals, they might experience some problems, especially if we remove, for example, the parrotfish, and we will create a huge imbalance in the ecosystem too. So acidification, this is the result of the ocean capturing the CO2. So in the water, we get a chemical reaction which tends to make the water more acid instead of more alkaline. And this acidification is creating a huge problem when the organisms who are producing calcium carbonate, um, um, it is too acid for them. They cannot produce enough calcium carbonate, or if they do so, the shells or the skeletons they're going to be weak, they're going to be soft, and this is adding too much stress to the corals. Okay, so pollutants and eutrophication, this goes hand to hand with the acidification. So pollutants like CO2 or like sewage waters or like waters from croplands, this water tends to have a lot of fertilizers which ended up in the ocean. And when these fertilizers get into the water, they are enhancing the algae formation, and these algae are continuously competing with the coral, which is again putting a lot of stress to the corals. So with a combination of all these factors, overfishing, global warming, acidification, pollutants, eutrophication, of course that the immune system of the corals are very low, and this opens the doors for different pathogens, different viruses, different bacteria as well. Human interaction, this is something that we can actually control. When we are in the water, we can tell our guests. I know that sometimes people, they don't understand that these are not rocks, these are actually corals. So if we create enough awareness among them, we might avoid this kind of pictures, of course. So finally, coral bleaching. So as I already told you before, we have the zooxanthellae, the microalgae living inside of the polyp. So when the temperature changes, the polyp will expel the zooxanthellae, okay? Or the zooxanthellae is going to volunteer get out of the polyp, either one or the other. So little by little, the coral by itself is going to start to turn into white color because they don't have pigments anymore. So the question is, okay, Eric, if the coral bleach is completely dead, no, actually, if we reduce the number of stressors, the microalgae might come back to the polyp and they'll continue growing. But of course, that coral will be susceptible for more bleaching events in the future. What happens, for example, if we don't mitigate, if we don't reduce these stressors, if the stressors are putting a lot of pressure, the coral will be completely bleached. And the problem of this is that sometimes we have massive uh, bleaching events, and we're not talking about just 100 meters, we're talking about kilometers. This is something that happened in Australia a few years ago. So after this event, what we have left is a very sad image of coral completely dead, fully covered with algae. The water is super turbid. No other organisms are inhabiting this area. This is very sad. And this is something that is happening more often in our oceans. So the outlook for coral reefs seems negative. Has anything been done to mitigate their decline? The answer is yes. So this is not the unique solution, but it's a partial solution. Coral restoration. Some scientists, what they do is they take corals from the ocean to the land or in situ in the same place, and they grow this for several weeks, several months, several years, and until they reach uh, um, certain size, they take these corals and they plant these corals into the reef back again. Okay, there are a lot of different studies behind this, but what, in my opinion, is really important is to not plant the same species of coral in the coral reefs, because according to genetics, according to biodiversity, if we have a lot of one thing is also not really good. We will not enhance the biodiversity in these places. Okay, so sustainable fishing practices. This is very hard to accomplish, to be honest, because in most countries these activities are not highly regulated like in others. But some countries they tend to encourage the people to use more selective fishing gear in order to catch certain species and not everything, like for example trawling. Um, yes, and also for example they encourage um, the spear fishers to not catch the biggest fish, because we know in fish that the bigger they are, more spring offspring will produce. So it's better to catch the medium size fish. Creation of MPAs, marine protected areas, is also a great solution, because if you designate one specific area, everything that is around this place is going to be protected. However, some scientists have also proposed that we should also protect local places, which in the future will be nested, because there's a lot of marine connectivity in the ocean. So it doesn't matter if we just protect this area if everything around here is unprotected. So it's better, for example, if we protect more local but continuous areas. So for example, if one place is affected, at least we have several more which gonna kind of um, hold on or withstand the whatever is happening in the ocean. Reduction of pollutants. Okay, some countries, for example, are opting to reduce their carbon dioxide emissions using green energies, which is great. But also something that we can do in our homes is to use less plastic products. That's a huge problem, not only because if we demand these products, we will tell the industry that they must produce more, and they'll produce more and more CO2. But also because most of these places, sadly, they ended up in the ocean, and they turn down into microplastics. And it's well known that microplastics, they have chemical compounds who are acting as endocrine disruptors. So they are damaging the metabolism of different organisms, including ours. So another thing that we can do is that if we're in the ocean, avoid to use sunscreen with oxybenzone. So there are other different options like zinc oxidine or titanium oxidine, which are less destructive. They're not as bad as oxybenzone, but some studies conducted by scientists have discovered that in large amounts also they're not that good. Okay, but yeah, so reef restoration projects and research, a lot of scientists, as I told you before, what they're doing is that they're performing different studies in order to see how they can combine, how they can use biotechnology to combine the corals who are highly resistant to high temperatures with the ones who are not. So the key is the microalgae. The some species of microalgae are more resistant to these temperatures than the others. So what they're trying to see if they can put some of these microalgae inside of other corals in order to make them more resilient to the temperature changes. And of course, public awareness and education. For me, that's something that we can do actually. We can educate ourselves, we can read more, we can learn more information, um, we can also share what we know, we can participate in community projects like beach cleaning, or for example, I like this one. This is Proyecto Arena or Sand Project. This is based in La Paz, and what are they doing? They offer some workshops to kids to create more conscious about the corals, but also what they do is they actively participate in coral restoration in La Paz, which is great. Obviously, World Wide Fund is keen always to protect natural resources like coral reefs. So this is just something great that has been happening in the last years. So ideally, if we would ask for a healthy coral reef, this is how it's supposed to look like. So we have a base, which is made out of stony or hard corals, and then we have, of course, different species of soft corals, and then we have filter organisms like clams or shells or other type of organisms who are gonna give us more less turbid waters, which is good. The sunlight will penetrate the ocean. The sunlight will penetrate the ocean easily. And then if we have also some type of crustaceans, other type of invertebrates, we're gonna be in charge to eat all the things that are depositing on the bottom or nearby the corals. And of course, we have reef fish, herbivorous and meat eaters. Of course, everything is going to be great. They will the parrotfish in this case, they will eat the algae that are colonizing the corals. And if we have sea turtles, they will be part of the ecosystem as well. And of course, that we have sharks that will control the population of different species. So this is how a healthy coral reef has to look like. But what happens, for example, if we only have this? Remember that I showed you an audio of how a healthy coral supposed to sound like? Okay, I have another audio for you. I'll play it. Can you hear something? Exactly, nothing. So unfortunately, our oceans will be these places where you cannot hear anything. So in order to protect them, we should do something. So friends, for me, that's it. Thank you so much for being here. So this is my email. If you have any question, if you want to regard to this, if you want to just, exchange some information, if you want to share music, whatever you want, just email me. And obviously, if you want to follow me, I like to post different pictures. I like photography. I like sports. I like nature. I like ocean. Thank you so much.
All right, Eric, thank you. And now, before we uh, take time for questions, I would like to remind everyone that if you do have a question, that you can submit it via the question field in your control panel. If you go to the top right corner, you'll see those three lines. Click on that and slide on down to questions and go ahead and submit it right in there. So let's ask some of these questions, Eric. So do you know, do fish eat coral, and in turn, can coral injure fish?
Oh, it's a very interesting question. So, as a matter of fact, sometimes when the parrotfish are scrapping, all the algae are attached to the coral, they tend to take part of the coral as well. And what they do is they eat part of the calcium carbonate that the polyps secrete. And once it passes through the digestion system, they poop everything. And as a result, what we have is white sand, which is going to be deposited on the beaches. So a lot of this action from the parrotfish ended up forming the beaches of different places. So yeah, sometimes they do accidentally, not on purpose, of course.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. Um, so does a given coral polyp produce both sperm and egg?
Uh, Good question. Okay, so they we have males and females, but also corals. They are very interesting creatures because some of them are hermaphrodites as well, and they can produce both things at the same time. They can change sexes as well. So yes, we have males and females, but also we have uh, corals who are producing both sexual cells. Yeah.
Gotcha, Eric. Thank you. Um, well, it looks like that's about all the questions that we actually do have, Eric. So this is a pretty thorough webinar, so we appreciate that. So I'm just going to throw it back to you for any closing comments you may have.
Yeah. So what I like to say is that these coral reefs are very very fragile and they have a lot of things to offer. So next time when you're in the ocean, try to remember what you have learned in this. I think before I travel, I like to inform myself more about the places because this is the way how I add more and more weight and more appreciation. So yeah, that's it.
All right, Eric, thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today. And I would also like to thank everyone who joined us today. So if you are interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, please give us a call at 800-543-8917. Or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. And if you are part of a photo club and would like NatHab to speak to your members about nature and travel photography, email us at webinars@nathab.com. Join us tomorrow for our next daily dose of nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.